Hi guys, so welcome to this week's cooking lesson. You all voted for chicken pie, so I'm not going to lie, thought steak pie would be more popular. But as I kind of sussed, that it was one of the service users that informed us they don't know how to make chicken pie, so that's why it was voted, which does make sense. So I'm going to go through how to make absolutely everything from the pastry to the filling to everything. So the first thing you want to do is grab a pot of water. Now the biggest pot you can find, the biggest pot you have, the better. Now I'm using chicken legs. You can use chicken breasts if you want, or thighs. So I'm using chicken legs just because, one, they're a lot cheaper and they're the most tastiest, I always find, like chicken legs or thighs. And again, I already I've washed my hands, I've got my apron on, I've got shoes on, I've made sure everything's all clean, I've wiped down my surface, and I've got my pot of hot soapy water so when I could wash my hands, and I also have my tea towel, which I'll grab for my hands only. And of course it's a Disney Chef one. My nephew's kindly brought it back from America. So I have that, and that's me sorted. So as I said, I'm using chicken legs. Now for this recipe, I'm only doing it for 2 people. So what I've got is just a chicken leg. So you get normally between 3 and 4 chicken legs in this pack, and this is from Sainsbury's. It's only £1.65. So if it's like a smallish leg like this, you can use 2, up to 2, as this will be a portion. But sometimes you do only get like 2 big chicken legs in this, so I would say just whatever you think's a correct portion. Now if you're using drumsticks, I'd say 4 drumsticks is a portion for a person, so like by the time you've got all the meat off of it. So I'd roughly say 4 drumsticks, and I'd say maybe anywhere between 2 and 3 thighs as well per person. So I'm making 2 portions here, so I'm doing the two chicken legs in the pot, and all that is cold water. I'm just going to quickly wash my hands and clean all this up. I'm going to pop these in bags, so I'll be back in 2 seconds. Right, so that's me put the chicken away, and I've washed my hands again, and I'm just going to show you what I've done. So this is cold water, and all I'm going to do is put a little bit of salt in this, and then I'm going to bring this slowly to the boil. Now it isn't cold water, so it will take a wee bit of time to get to the boil. So what I would recommend is put it on a bit of a high heat and then just cover it, and then you'll start to hear this like rattle when it starts to get up to boiling. So we'll come back to it when that starts happening. So while you're waiting on this heating up, this is where you can make your pastry. Now in here I'm making a small, like I said, I'm making a 2 portion dose. So I've got 125 grams of flour, and I've got roughly about 55 grams of butter. Now you can use butter for this. I'm using veg spread, just because I can't use butter, I'm lactose, so I use an olive oil spread. So it's just generally, you're making short crust pastry, it's just a flour and a fat essentially. So the general rule is whatever you weigh the flour, like what my gran taught me, whatever you weigh the flour, so you half the amount of fat. So I've got 125 in here, so I've got roughly about 57. But if you're working in old ways, like ounces, the way my gran taught me, I've got 5 ounces of flour in here and 2.5 ounces of butter. So it's just whatever it is halved, and then I've also added a pinch of salt. So all I'm doing here is a method called rubbing in. So you're just picking up another tip as well, which I need to do because I'm very hot-handed. You want to try and get your butter as cold as possible. So if it's straight out of the fridge, that's the best. And if it is butter, break it up into little cubes, like already pre-cut into cubes. If it's just like a veg spread like I've got, it'll naturally come apart quite easily. but obviously if it's butter, cut into little cubes. And all I'm doing is lifting it up and rubbing it between my fingertips. And it's called rubbing in the flour. You're just blending in the flour and fat together. Now, the reason I said about cold hands is if you're hot-handed, which I naturally am, I always have warm hands, the butter tends to melt quite quickly and stick to your hands quite a lot. So the tip my gran always gave me was she'd make me wash my hands in cold water first. So I just run my hands under cold water, dry them off, just to cool my hands down a little bit. It was when we used to make scones, because it's the same sort of technique of rubbing in. So you want to keep on doing that, and then you'll see that it'll start to slowly come together, and the flour mix will go like a crumble mix also like, kind of like a crumble mix on the top, because essentially it's the same thing, and it'll go like a darkish yellowy colour, so like a gold, well, not quite, like a golden yellow I suppose is a better term to do it. And all you want to do is rub it together, and then you want to get something that resembles fine breadcrumbs. So you'll see that I've got bigger chunks, so all I do is I just slowly rub, and you won't use the palm of your hands. You'll see the palm of my hands are quite clean. You're only using your fingertips. Another thing that my gran taught me to do, is if you really want to make it extra fine, is when you get to this stage, when it's all completely rubbed in, you've not got any big lumps of fat or lumps of flour, you'll see that it's almost like now a goldeny colour, is you pop this through a sieve, and that makes it extra light. So if you're wanting to make a scone mix or something like that, you can do this. Also, you can do this in a food processor. If you have a food processor, bung it in the food processor and it'll automatically go like this within maybe about, I think it's like 30 seconds or something. I do have a food processor, but I do prefer doing stuff like this by hand. So, as you can see, it's not took that long for me to do this. So, I've got fine breadcrumbs. So you want it, you'll see that it's all gone quite like fine breadcrumbs. It's that nice golden colour. So you want to make a wee well in the middle. And I'll just quickly wash my hands and come back. So I've washed my hands, and what I've just got a jug of cold water, and make sure it's cold water. I'm just going to put automatically 2 teaspoons, well 4 teaspoons, sorry, of cold water in here. Then you want to grab a knife and then just slowly blend it on in the middle. What you're wanting to do is just slowly incorporate it. I use a knife at first just so my hands aren't completely sticky. And then I'm just going to add another 2. So normally you use maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons of water, but I like adding it in teaspoons just so I don't put too much water in it, essentially. Because I always had a habit as well of just putting too much into it. So you want to add just enough water until it blends together. So you can't automatically just put in 2 tablespoons of water and that'll be your base mix, and it'll come together quite nicely, and you might need to add just a little bit at a time. Now the key with pastry is you don't want to handle it too much. Pastry doesn't like being handled that much. So it'll all come together, slowly all come together. So I'm just going to add another teaspoon more. And then I think that'll be enough for my water in this. So you can see I've not put my hands in this yet, and it's all come together quite nicely in a dough. Now what you want to do is get a bit of flour on your surface. Flour your hands ever so slightly. And then you just want to knead this into a ball, like into a quick ball. Not handling it too much. And it shouldn't be sticky. If it is sticky, just put a little bit more flour into it. So all you're doing is you're wanting to just roll this into a rough ball. And then get some cling film. And then place your cling film out, put this in the middle, squish it down quite a lot so it's almost flat, and then wrap it, and then you're just going to place this in the fridge, because like every dough or pastry, it's good to rest it. So you want to rest this for minimum 20 minutes. You can rest it, you can make the pastry in advance obviously, but if you're making it at the same time as here, I'll just quickly pop the light on. It's starting to get a bit dark, so I'm filming this in the afternoon and I get quite a lot of light in my kitchen by afternoon. So I'm just going to quickly wipe down my surface. And then we're ready to prepare the veg, so I'll come back with my veg board. So I've got my veg board and my veg knife, and all I'm doing is sharpening my knife. Like I said before, it's important to sharpen your knives every time before you use them. And to sharpen your knives, I will do a video on knives in general. I'll be posting that this week, I think tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, it would have been yesterday by the time this post goes through. This video uploads. So yeah, what you want to do is forward, back, or you might have one of them knife sharpeners that you just sharpen a knife. This is a steel, it's a chef's way of doing it, just to sharpen it. So I've sharpened my knife, and what I've got here is I've got my carrot, so I'm going to pop off the end, pop off the top, and what I've done is I've already pre-cut some of my celery because there was like off bits. So I'm popping this all into a box, and this is going to be like my like rubbish box. That's the only way I could describe it. Scraps box. And I'll get my veg peeler. So I've got my veg peeler, and all I'm doing is peeling my carrots. Now you can do this while putting this pot on a boil, so it will take a good half an hour to come up to a boil. So what you want to do is, as soon as you've put this on, so it's starting to come to a boil, it's came to a boil, so when it comes to a boil, just turn it down ever so slightly. I'd say to a medium heat, and from the minute you put this on, look at your clock, and you want to count roughly 30 minutes. But the way I time it is, by the time I've made the short crust pastry, chopped all my veg, it's roughly about 30 minutes. So for my veg, I'll get a separate bowl to pop in. Now, I'm not actually going to be chopping it into certain shapes just yet. I'm actually putting it in quite whole, and then same with the celery. I've just took the wee end bits off a little bit, and then same with celery, I'm just chopping it in half, and then with my onion, so I'm not putting this bit in, and I'll give the reason for that in a minute. And the same as this bit. I'm going to put these in the food bin separately. So anything that has a root / like dirt bacteria. So then all I'm doing, I'm popping my peel in. And then all I'm doing is quartering this. So I'm putting it in half, putting it in half again, and then popping it in. Right, and then I've got my leek. Now I'm not going to use this whole leek, I'm only going to use half of it. So I'll just pop that in there. I'm just going to cut down the middle to make it half, just so it's easier. Didn't quite cut through. And I'm putting the other half in the fridge because I'm going to use that for the cooking lesson. And all I'm doing is again halving this. So I'm keeping it relatively whole. I'm not chopping it or dicing it. Now you can't use the leaves. You can use the leaves all the way up till, I'd say maybe just chop off these end bits here. But all the leaves still have flavour in them. Just popping them in. So then this is your basic veg that's going in. Now also, I'm doing roast potatoes with this, so I like to parboil my potatoes. So what I do, I normally buy these loose potatoes, or like loose baby potatoes. Just because I live on my own, I feel like I don't eat enough potatoes to buy a whole bag. So I normally just buy loose ones because it's what I use. So I'm making this obviously for myself and my neighbours. And all I do is I half my baby potatoes. Then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to show you this pot. Now, because obviously we've left the skin and everything on it, what happens is you get a bit of scum going around the edge. Now it's just the excess fats boiling off. So what the best thing to do is to take a spoon or a ladle and just go around the edge and then pop this into another pot. It's called scumming the surface. So you'll see when you make soups as well, that normally when you boil a soup, especially if you're using some sort of fat or even just vegetables, you'll get this scummy surface. Now, in order to not distaste the soup, you take all this little scummy stuff off and it doesn't tarnish the soup as much. Or if you're like my mum, just stir it in. But yeah, the chef way is to just go around the edge with a little ladle or a spoon and collect all the scum that's came off. Now I'd leave this here because you will be collecting more. So, because this has probably been on for round about 20 minutes already, what you want to do is your bowl of veg, you just pop that straight in, no cutting. And then leave it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop these potatoes in some water. Now just cold water. And I'm going to let them soak for about 20 minutes. Now, this will be cooking in total for then 40 minutes after these have soaked for 20. But all together, so then after 20 minutes, what you want to do is pop your potatoes into your pot. Water and all, because 9 times out of 10, a lot of your water is going to disappear with it boiling. Well, at least simmering. So you want to cook all this for a minimum of an hour, because you're wanting to cook your chicken all the way through. Now chicken legs, they do take longer to cook, like same with thighs, they take anywhere between 45 minutes in the oven, or 40 to 45 depending if you have a fan. Now, I'm going to explain now, if you're making a vegetable pie, or you're using chicken pieces, the corn pieces, or a meat alternative, you can essentially do the exact same technique, but obviously not put the chicken in, just put the veg straight in and boil it for 20 minutes. Because essentially what you're then making is your own veg stock. because when we're making all this, all we're doing is boiling it all up together. We're cooking it, but also making chicken stock at the same time. Therefore, we don't need to use a stock cube. So there is cheap ways of doing this. Obviously, if you buy cooked chicken, you can use a stock cube and just cook all your veg together, boil up your veg, and then chop it all and put it into the pie. That is an option. But this way, I just think it's better because then you're making your own stock. You know what's in it. And the reason that I've left these out is because I'm making roast potatoes. I'm only going to boil these for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to stick them in the oven the same time as the pie to roast them. But yeah, so if you, I said again, if you are making a vegetable one, you can just pop all your vegetables in the same way you'd make a vegetable stock. So you put water in, bring it to the boil, add in all your vegetables that you want in your pie, minus mushroom. If you are making mushroom, I would obviously not. Do not roast, do not boil the mushroom up. It won't taste that great. But these are like the carrot, the celery, leek, and onion are really good for a good base for a vegetable stock base. So boil them all up. Even if you don't necessarily want to put them in your sauce, if you don't like the look of them. The other thing you can do is with the white sauce that we will make is you can blend all your, like similar to the tomato sauce, you can blend all of your vegetables together, then add it into the white sauce. So it obviously won't make, the white sauce will go obviously the colour of the vegetables, but it is a way in case you don't like physically seeing your veg, it is an option. But they will break down a lot, and you can chop very, very small that you don't necessarily see it in the sauce. So. But yeah, so I'll come back when this has been boiling for 20 minutes, then I'll add my potatoes in. So the chicken's been cooking, boiling away. So the chicken's been cooking away for about 40 minutes roughly now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my half potatoes. So I'll pop that in with the cold water included, and then cover it again. And then I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes. Now in this 20 minutes, I'll pop this out the way as well. I'm going to make my bechamel sauce. So I'm going to pop in, I've already made a bechamel sauce before. This one is going to be slightly different, so I'm going to film it again. So I'll just go and get my ingredients for that, and I'll come back. So while that's cooking for another 20 minutes, this is where you can do one of two things. So you can wait the 20 minutes until it's all done. Now this depends on how you're doing your pie. So you can do your pie like a fully enclosed pie, or you can have it just a pastry top, like what you get in a restaurant. You get, for example, I'm doing my pie in this dish, which I get. So I'm doing my pie in these dishes. It's the dish again that I picked up from Home Bargains. They were like 89p at one point, and so I just picked them up. So I'm getting my flour out, my pastry out. Now this pastry mix is for if you, actually pop this on the side so it's not rattling. This is for if you're making a top and tail pastry mix. So I'm just going to cut it in half, and then you want to put this half out and then this half back in the fridge. Now this is if you're encasing, this method is if you're encasing the full pie in pastry. So what I want to do is get a decent amount of flour on your board. And then, like I said before, pastry doesn't like to be handled a lot. So the least amount of time you handle it, the better. Just grab my mix. So then what I'm wanting to do is, I'll bring it forward a bit. I've roughly folded it into like an oblong shape because I'm wanting to do this sort of shape. And then I'm just gently rolling it out. Now, unlike the pizza dough, this might stick a little bit. So after every roll, the rule is move it. So I want to roll this quite thin, not thick. Now this is quite a delicate pastry as well, so it might break, but don't worry if it breaks. It's all fine. You can always patchwork, as my gran always said, patchwork your pastry. So you want to get this layer base quite thin. Because it is the base, the last thing you want is a really thick, unless you want a thick pastry, it's entirely up to yourself, but I don't relatively like a thick pastry, I quite like a thin crisp one in the bottom. So you want to roll it out so it just covers the pie dish, and then all I'm doing is popping it in, making sure it fits. I'm just going to roll it out ever so slightly more. So, like I said again, every time I'm rolling this, I'm moving it, just so it doesn't stick. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to grease this bowl, so I'll come back in 2 seconds once it's greased. I'm going to grease it with the same butter that I used for this, so it's like an olive oil spread, so I'm just going to pop it all around there, and I'll come back. So I've lightly greased this, so as you can see, just put it all around the edge, and all I'm going to do is pop this over. And I'm just going to gently press on it so it sticks to the side of the pastry. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press it round with the rolling pin just to get all the excess off. Should cut it ever so slightly at the sides. All I'm going to do is make it quickly press, just make it go round so it's like a lip around the thing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to blind bake this for 10 minutes. So I'll show you how to do that. What I'm going to do is, so what I've got is I've got a piece of parchment paper here, or baking paper, and all I'm going to do is quickly score. You can do this with scissors, but I tend to just tear it. You get the corners and you want to tear into the middle. It is obviously easier with scissors, but I currently can't find my scissors anywhere, so we're tearing. And all this is doing is it'll create an indentation to line the tin properly, the pastry pie properly. Now obviously if you're using a round dish, it's just a case of putting it over and cutting out a circle. And I'm just making sure all that's covered. And then by blind baking is essentially you're covering the area and your way to cook it in the oven. So I've got the oven set at 180, and all I'm going to do is pop some rice in here. You can use bacon beads, you could use rice, you could use pasta, just anything that weights it down really. Lentils is another good thing to use. I'm using rice because that's what I have available. The other thing you can do as well, which is really good, that I might actually do just now, is place oats in it and then use the oats as part of a pancake or part of your cereal in the morning with some like frozen fruit and yogurt. It's really nice because it's the toasted oats, so I think I'm going to do that today. So as you can see here, I've just placed in, it's just bog standard porridge oats. I've placed in all the way up to the top, gone around the edges. Now this is just to cook the pastry, because there's nothing worse when you get a pastry or a pie like whether it's fruit or savoury, that it's got that soggy bottom. If any of you watch Bake Off or Best Home Cook, it's the one thing Mary Berry doesn't like is a soggy bottom. So yeah, so then stick this in the oven for 15 minutes. Also, the leftover pastry you have, just pop it back into your other half and set it back in the fridge for the top. But what to do is don't mix this one together, because what you can do, you can use this one for decoration on the top, because this has been handled a little bit more. So just pop it on top of the cling film on top of the other half. So I'm just going to get cleaned up here. So while I'm cleaning up, I'll just go over a few things. So if, for example, you don't want to make your own pastry, you can obviously buy shop bought pastry, which is perfectly fine, especially if you're doing puff pastry as well. So on one of the examples, I'm going to just do a puff pastry top, and I've bought shop bought pastry for that, so I'll explain what to do with that one. Plus at the end as well, I'll give lots of little recipes that you can do, like little handy tips that you can do for extra, like using up the extra pastry. If you've bought it fresh, you can always freeze the pastry as well. Always make sure the packet though, because sometimes a lot of the fresh ones have been pre-frozen, so you can't freeze them, but majority of the fresh ones you can freeze. So I'm going to pop my chopping board back here. I'll just give my knife a clean. So another wee tip as well is when you're not using your knife on your chopping board, to always keep the knife edge away from the way you'll handle it, and at the side of the board, not on the board, because it can move about with it being on the handle. So always keep it at the side with the blade facing towards the board, so no accidents can happen basically. So after about an hour of boiling, you'll see this'll be your general look of your pot. That most of the onions would have went translucent, because that means they're cooked, and then the chicken as well. Chicken will be white instead of raw. Now what you want to do here is you want to grab a bowl or a cup. So I've just grabbed a bowl, and all I'm going to do is get a ladle. So as you see, I've just grabbed the bowl, and all I'm going to do is to collect some stock. So you can completely keep all of this stock if you wish to use it, if you're going to make maybe soup. It's quite a good wee base for a soup. So what I've got here is your chicken's been boiled. After it's boiled in total time for an hour, you want to grab yourself a bowl and a colander. Almost forgot what this was called. You can use a sieve as well if you've got a sieve. And what you want to do is carefully pour out the contents of your pot. We'll pour absolutely all of it out. Then what you want to do is grab a plate, and what I would recommend in doing is using tongs so you don't burn yourself. And what you want to do is grab the chicken. Now your chicken might just fall off the bone, so be careful. When you grab your chicken, put your chicken on one bowl. So I've just put mine on a plate, and I'm just setting that to the side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another bowl. I'm just going to pop all my vegetables in it. Not the potatoes though, just the vegetables. Now obviously you will have a lot of stock left. So what you want to do is give it a good shake. You want to get most of the moisture out. And the easiest thing is just tip it into a bowl. And then you're going to put this stock to the side. Now bear in mind this will be very, very hot, so please be careful when handling. And then you're left with your veg bowl. Now this is where I'm going to get my oven tray. So what I'm doing, I've got my oven tray here, and with my tongs, I'm just going to carefully grab all the potatoes. So I'll come back when I've done all the potatoes. So as you can see, I've got all my potatoes here, and all I'm going to do is quickly salt them, and then grab a little bit of pepper, and then all I'm doing is just a little, I'd say maybe 2 tablespoons of oil, no more. Drizzle over it. Now you can use any oil. I use this oil, rapeseed oil. I just like the taste of it better. Give them a quick shake, and then set them to the side, because you're not actually put them on. You may put them on when you put your pie in for the last time. So what you're left with is this, which is your veg. Now what you want to do is, you can, if you want, if you feel this is too hot to handle, what you can do is run this under cold water. So just get your colander and run it under cold water, and it's all easier to chop. So I'm just going to chop the carrots. Now this is where you chop them into any sort of size you want. So I'm chopping them into quite small pieces, just for my neighbour to... Now this will be easy to chop, because they will be pretty much cooked. So as I say, I'm just in half, and half again. And what I'm doing, I'm just actually going to leave this on the veg board to add in, just because that saves me dirtying another plate. So then what you want to do is, this is the tricky part, so you want to try and get all your onion. Oh, there's my celery stick, that's normally still quite whole. And what I do with my onion is I just roughly chop, because it is all cooked. So I just roughly chop it all up, and then turn, and then chop. So it ends up roughly in little tiny chunks, but it's going to be spread throughout a sauce. So just tiny little chunks. So it will go kind of mushy, but don't worry, because it's all going to be added into a sauce anyway, so it's fine. So I'm just making it pretty small, just because my neighbour's not a big fan of veg. So the smaller I make it, the more it appears like it isn't there. And then same with the celery, just cutting up into small little pieces. Now obviously again, when you are getting to the small part of it, to make sure that your knuckles are touching the blade, never your fingertips, okay? And then I've just got the other little celery half, and then the leeks to chop up into. And obviously any leftover stock, you just pour into your big bowl that your stock's sitting there. So I'll quickly chop all the rest of this up, and then same thing, your leeks are kind of like your onions, same sort of thing, just roughly chop them all. I'll come back when I've chopped it all. So that's me chopped all of this up. Now the next thing I need to move on to is deboning all my chicken. So I'm just going to pop this to the side. All I'm doing is getting my veg bowl I've got, and all you've got to do, the skin will naturally just fall off this. Now don't be too concerned that it might still be ever so slightly pink, it just depends on how big your chicken legs are, but you're going to cook the rest of it in the pie for a further 20 minutes anyway, but it should be pretty much all cooked. Now like I said again, you could leave this to cool and all your chicken will naturally fall off the bone anyway. Like, it comes off quite easily off the bone, as you can see. It'll just, because it's been boiled, it'll naturally all fall off, so you want to get most of the main meat off. So I'll come back when I've got all my chicken off the bone. So as you can see here, I've got quite a lot of chicken. There's still more chicken on there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the rest off and give to my mum and dad's dog. A little tip as well, if you are giving chicken to the dog, make sure that no little bones are in it, because they can be really harmful for the dogs and choke on them. So here's all the chicken that I've got left over from the 2 legs. There's more than enough, so I'm going to pop that to the side, and then by the time you've done that, your blind bacon pastry, if you're doing it in case pastry tin, will be cooked. So I'll take that out of the oven now. So like I said, I used the oats, and all I'm going to do is lift these oats out carefully and pop them into a container. Well, I'm actually pop them into a glass and then store them for tomorrow morning's breakfast. So as you can see, I've took this out of the oven, and I'm just going to pierce this back ever so slightly, and then I'm going to collect the oats and then try and carefully pour them into the glass for tomorrow morning's breakfast. There we go. Just pop this in the bin. So you can see here, this pastry's almost cooked. It's not cooked all the way through, but it's roughly blind baked. It's just cooked enough around the edges. It is plopped down the side a little bit, but that doesn't matter. Now, sometimes if you're like me, you sometimes get a little bit of whatever you've put in to weigh it down. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways in which you could do your pastry pie. So obviously you can do it blank, where you can just put it into the base and then put a pastry top, but I'm obviously doing the 2. So what I'm doing, I'm setting this to the side. So what I do is, see, because I've got a round, like quite a small one, I just pop this onto my roasting tin that I've got with my potatoes already. I'm just popping this up to the side. Now this is where we make our sauce, so we'll keep all the chicken and the veg. So the sauce for this is just the exact same as like lasagna. It's a bechamel sauce, so it's a white sauce. So I'll quickly go through how I'm going to make it. It's going to be slightly different. So what I'm going to pop into here, I'm popping in about 25 grams roughly of butter. Now it's just your fat again. You're melting this. I use this is the spread I use, just because it's dairy free. So olive one. Now you're just going to gently melt this down. So then once this is gently melted down, all you're going to do is add the same amount. Again, I added roughly 25 grams of fat, so I'm putting 25 grams of flour. And then you're mixing this together like the bechamel. It's the base of white sauce. You're mixing this together to make a roux, which it all clumps together. Now you want to cook this out for about a minute, so I'll come back in a minute. So then once this is cooked out for roughly a minute, now this bit's optional, so like the bechamel, you add in, I've got 3 things I'm going to add in here. So I'm adding in some white wine, which is 50 millilitres of white wine. So I'm going to add that. If you are using white wine, you don't need to, you could just do half and half of milk and stock. If you are doing the white wine, put the white wine in first, because you want to burn off the alcohol. So it'll go the exact same way a roux does, but you're just cooking this out because you want to burn off the alcohol in the white wine. So then I've measured out 100 ml of stock in here and 100 ml of stock in here, because essentially it's 250 ml of liquid. Because whatever you're measuring your butter or your flour, so mine's is 25 grams, it's 10 times the amount of liquid. So if you're making a slightly bigger white sauce, you do 50, 50 and 500 ml. So then after I've mixed in my white wine, you'll see it'll still go like a roux. Now this stock came from the liquid in the bowl of which we poured out all of our chicken and veg into. Now I'm just going to slowly add my stock next. So I do my stock next. I do the milk glass just because it's the coolest. Now you just want to slowly add it in and mix so you don't get any lumps. You want to keep this on a gentle heat as well, because you don't want it to burn or go too thick too quickly. So you can make this stock completely without any milk alternative. You could just make it with chicken stock and it's completely fine. The sauce still works the same way. Just to get the creamy effect, I do use a bit of milk. So I'm using coconut milk here, just because I can't use normal milk. Now with coconut milk, you will find you might need to whisk ever so slightly more, because it does tend to like bulk up a lot more because it's quite high in saturated fats, so it coagulates quite. If you look on my lasagna video, go into the science of how a sauce thickens and how the starch reacts if you click back onto that. So then again, like the last one, it'll go very, very runny, and then over a gentle heat, just gentle stirring, and it'll naturally thicken up. Now, just while this is waiting on thickening up, you're left with quite a lot of vegetable stock. Now, obviously, I'm making like a smaller amount, but if you're making a family of 4, you'll still be left with quite a lot of stock. Now, this can be the base of any other sauce that you want, or you can make soup with this. This is really good. So, like any sort of veg you've got at the end, at the left of the week that you need to use up, just bung it all into a saucepan with this. It'll make a really good veg soup, and then you could get little pieces of chicken, because this will obviously be chicken flavoured, but obviously if you're not using any meat in it and you've just used the chicken, the corn alternative, this will just be a veg stock base. So then you're left with what you would normally essentially buy in a stock cube or a stock pot, and you could use this for a vegetable soup, or like you can make more chicken pie. You can keep this in the fridge for up to 3 days covered, and when you do cling film it right onto the surface and all the way around, and it'll stop it like getting that little skin. But only a maximum of 3 days, because you can get quite bad bacteria on things like stock as well, build up after 3 days. So if you keep it in the fridge, obviously allow it to cool for 90 minutes, completely cool, then stick it into the fridge. Or what you can do, another thing you can do is what I tend to do. I just leave it in this bowl and cover it, and then put it into, use it for cooking. Yeah. So this has started to thicken. So what you want is not quite as thick as you want your bolognese, your lasagna bechamel to go. But as soon as you start whisking, when you start to see the trails of the whisk, you'll know that's thick enough. So then what you want to do is turn the temperature right down. And then this is where you add in all of your vegetables. And give it a good whisk. And then you add in your chicken bits. I'm just going to swap for a spoon now. Now the reason I'm using this spoon to mix it all together is because it's going to be easier to dish it out. So then that's that sorted, and then you just leave this to the side. So like I said before, you could do the pastry tin where you've blind baked half your pastry and put it in, or you could leave it the bottom full if you're trying to be a bit more healthy, not use as much pastry because pastry is quite high in fat. You could leave the bottom of the dish and just do a pastry top. So I'm going to make a pastry top for my one that I'm doing fully encased. So this is short crust pastry. Now I do have, for the top, the one where I'm not going to put a top on it, I have got puff pastry. But it's entirely up to yourself, whatever pastry you prefer. But I got puff pastry for my neighbour because I know she likes puff pastry better. So again, I'm just flattening this out until it kind of an oblong shape, because that's the kind of lid I want. Now the lid I'm going to make slightly thicker than what I did my bottom, just because it's the top. Now all I'm going to do is, what I do is for my other one, I just kind of measure it out, make sure I've got enough, and then just pop down, and then the outline's kind of there, and then I just get my knife and then kind of just quickly carve out a rough pastry lid. Now it doesn't need to be perfection because it is a pastry, and I'm setting this to the side because I'm going to put this on top of this one. So what I then do is I fill my pie. And then I'll make sure this covers the top, so I need to roll it out ever so slightly more. But the rough shape's there, so that's the main thing. And then I cover my pie. So I'm folding it round the edge. Now I'm not going to cut it off, I'm going to cut off the edges when it cooks. Now you can pop a little hole in for the air, and that's where you can get a wee bit creative. So with the spare bits, like I said, you can make little shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it out. And I'm just going to get a pastry cutter. So just grab some pastry cutters. And what I'm doing is I'm literally doing letters for my name, because then I know which pastry is mine and which pastry is my neighbour's, because one's made with butter, one's made with olive spread. Oh, looks like I'll need to roll that Z again. Never cut it enough. Oops, same with the C. So I'll come back. Now all I've done here is I've cut out a couple of shapes, and then all I've got is a beaten egg. I'm just going around the top of it with the beaten egg. Can't use a pastry brush if you have one. My pastry brush is currently at my parents' house, so because my mum nabbed it. But yeah, so then all I'm doing is popping this on the tray with my potatoes that I've already got here. Then I've left enough space for my, I'm popping this one on here, and then I'm going to put this one on a separate tray. So like I said before, I've also got ready-made pastries for my neighbour, so it's all buttered puff pastries. This is just the ready-to-roll one that comes out in a quite a handy little ready-to-roll. I had some left over in the freezer from when I made stuff beforehand, so it's just unsticking it all. We'll go there in the end. So this is ready rolled. This was something I bought fresh like last month, but I didn't use all of, so I put the rest in the freezer. So it's obviously a bit more sticky than usual because I've defrosted it. So then all I'm going to do is measure out my pastry case again. I'm just going to go around the edge ever so slightly. This is obviously already rolled out for me, so I don't need to roll it out. I just simply cut around it. So then I'm going to fill my dish. And then carefully take this all off, and then roughly just plop it over. And again, I'm not cutting it yet. I'll cut this big bit though, this is a big chunk. Just folding it over, popping an air hole in, and I'll make a little decoration. And then I'll come back. So I've just done my neighbour's initials so I know which pie's which, and then I'm just going around the pie with an egg wash. Quickly washing my hands. Now, if I was only just doing the one pie, I'd normally have one pie in here and then my roast potatoes on the other side. So you're going to pop this in the oven for around about anywhere from 25 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on whatever your pastry says. But if you're using the short crust pastry, 20 minutes. And I'll pop this one in the oven also on a separate tray. And I'll come back when they're cooked. So I've took these out of the oven, and all I've done is plated up some veg, and there's my roast potatoes after cooking them for the 25 minutes with my pastry. I'm just going to dish this up and then enjoy my tea.